they won't tell me nothing. His girlfriend told me that the police was messing with him. He was finna get up and run. When he was trying to get up and run, they start shooting him.
The officer started engaging him in conversation again, and then the individual produced a pistol with his arm straight out, pointing at the officer from kind of across the hood of the police car. At that point, the officer produced his service weapon and fired what we think at this point is 3 shots. Got the call at about
Hello, Canada. I'm Anthony Fury in for Adrian Batcher. That's our top story of the day. Another shooting in the greater Ferguson area, in the greater St. Louis area. In Missouri, violent protests have broken out in suburban St. Louis after another black 18-year-old, another black youth, he's 18 years old, was killed by police officers in another altercation. Desmond Cole joins me now, journalist, and you have traveled to the Ferguson area recently and watched all of this unfold and spoken to the people on the ground. Ross McLean, former investigator with Toronto Police and media commentator. Desmond, this is... You just read the headline, and whatever you think about any of these stories, any of these angles, not again is what you have to think when you hear about this.
I do. I continue, unfortunately, to say that I'm not surprised that these things keep happening. This is a very unclear incident that we have right now. There's a lot of evidence that's still rolling out. What I find really interesting about this situation where Antonio Martin, 18, was killed last night is that the police and the mayor of the city that he was shot and killed in have already come out and given their side of the story before saying, don't worry though, there's going to be a full investigation. So they've come out and said, here's what happened, here's why the officer had the right to do this, but don't worry, there will be a complete investigation, and I find that extremely troubling.
Ross, do you agree? I mean, I think the police are clearly aware of and concerned about the whole climate of police protests you're seeing, whether it's in this region, in the New York area. We've seen a few smaller protests on the streets of Toronto. A lot of people weighing in about police brutality, ranging from very mild to violent protests. Would you agree with Desmond's assessment that the police should really just zip it and let the investigation take course?
I will agree with his assessment insofar as this. We don't have uniformity, even in Canada, let alone across the states, for how we investigate police uses of force and violence. You know, we don't. And we saw certainly in the earlier Ferguson case where the police came out and they did feed misinformation. They leaked the video from the store to sort of prejudice the investigation. And they leaked some information to certainly get public opinion at least moving on their side. You know, on this particular case, I'm going to say this. I've seen the enhanced video of this shooting for what took place here. And it certainly appears that the young man in this case, they're at the store, the police were tending for something else. Don't forget, the police right now are on high alert to officers assassinated in a car, other threats, they're arresting people. So they don't like when someone comes rushing up to the car to do something, which is more or less what happened here. But clearly, it shows this young man at least bringing his hands up and going like this. Right at the, we don't know if there's a gun in his hands, but he's at least doing that, which corroborates.
Hundreds of protesters already taken to the streets. Clearly, they see this as all wrapped up in the Michael Brown, Eric Garner stuff, the New York City street protests. But you've called for the police to not say, okay, here's my side of the story, there's an investigation. Should these people out in the streets also do a little restraint and listen to what Ross is saying? I mean, not listen to Ross specifically, but just look at videos and let their cooler heads prevail as well.
I'll tell you the problem with cooler heads prevail. Mike Brown is killed. He's left to die for 4.5 hours in the street. The cops don't say anything for weeks, as Edward pointed, and there's all these problems. And then the person who did it doesn't even go to trial. How do you tell people to calm down in that circumstance when somebody's been murdered, left in the street for 4.5 hours? You know, Mike Brown was picked up not by an ambulance in the end, but by a police car. There's so many things wrong with what he happened, and then there's no indictment of the officer, Darren Wilson, who killed him. You're asking people to remain calm, but you're not performing justice in their eyes. So it's kind of hard to kind of ask people, well, you know, we messed that one up, but have patience with us. People are losing their lives in the street.
And Ross, to Desmond's point, though, I think things get so heightened both in people who have some aspersions and hostility towards police methods and the police themselves that it looks like we got a bunch of self-fulfilling prophecies on our hands here, where both sides are are ready to go at it to serve what they really passionately feel and think is going on, to protect their own interests, a very human thing to do.
No, I think you bring out one of the key points in this. We see the extreme side of the people who are protesting against the police, yelling dead cops, right? Which is the extreme side of that protest, and it all represents the majority of what people are saying. And you see, if you will, the extreme police position where they're saying, well, everybody who's protesting against us is anti-cop and hates cops. It's not the truth. I believe that the truth is in the big mass in the middle, which is we want transparent, accountable rules that the public can count on.
And I stand by that, and I stand by holding the police to account. But Desmond, a lot of these things, NYPD, KKK, how many kids did you kill today? These sort of slogans that we're seeing at, I don't know exactly what percentage of protests in New York we're seeing, but I mean, New York, center of media, getting out to the world, inflaming other sentiment. I mean, that's certainly not corollary with compatible with anything you've been saying, with anything either of you have been saying.
So what? People are angry. I mean, let's put this in proper context. We're talking about New York City and the New York Police Department. You know what Stop and Frisk is, right, Anthony?
Yep.
Hopefully your viewers know that Stop and Frisk is a program that has essentially made it criminal to walk on the streets of New York City while being a black or a brown man. You will be stopped. This is fully documented, by the way that the police have been doing this to black and brown men and targeting them. So we're not just talking about a city where every now and again somebody gets shot and then people have an unfair reaction. We're talking about the absolute criminalization of being a racialized person in New York. You're not allowed while evading police suspicion.
And how do we move forward to solve those problems? Is this the right way to move forward? I get people are angry all the time over different things. People sending their anger out there totally makes sense to me.
Yeah.
What is the productive way to solve people's problems? This doesn't seem to me to be the productive way.
It's because it's not, I think, maybe tailoring to your view of calmness and respectability that you expect these folks to have when their friends and brothers and sisters are being killed in the street.
No, anger makes sense, however you want to show it.
So don't tell people to be productive when there's actually no... So look, there's a fellow...
I'm not telling people to be anything. I'm asking you, how can we solve these problems?
By getting justice. By getting justice.
And how do we get justice?
What we do is, when the police kill somebody as they killed... excuse me.
Antonio Martin? Or
No,
Eric
Garner. There's so many that I'm getting myself flustered in recent times. There's been so many. When the police killed Eric Garner, 7 police officers stood around that man after he was choked and lying unconscious. Why didn't any of them try to help him? Why didn't... So even after
they
you
already
make the
broke
mistake...
the rules to begin with. So we already know they screwed up totally there.
Even after you make the mistake, when you accidentally, if we believe that, shoot Tamir Rice in the stomach, a 12-year-old child, and someone else passing by on the street has to come by to give him CPR because the police won't actually do it after they shot him. Fine, you make a mistake as a police officer, what regard for the life of that person do you have when you can let them lay there in the street and die?
Ross, can we punish the police, make an example of them, and can we also make an example of the violent protesters? I don't like either side of this story. And I want to bring it down. Yeah. I mean, Desmond's saying he wants, nobody's here saying they don't want justice.
But let me...
He should not have done the chokehold on Eric Garner. Disproportionality, 7-8 cops there. What were they doing? Deal with it. Get investigation, punish, fire, jail them, whatever.
Absolutely. And by the same token of the arguments that you're making, I'm not discounting your arguments for doing this, Desmond, but to say that every police officer is good cop, dead cop, good cop, dead cop. Let me just finish this point. Is there are a lot, and the majority of police officers are very good. They want to do their job. They're not racist. I met last year with the Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers, finer group of officers I never met before in my life. Really good people who we have out policing and protecting our city. So the fact that there are some issues with some officers and some use of force, let alone the systemic not dealing with it, that's another issue. I do think that in order to get productive, we need to be able to say, okay, you know what, it's democratic. You can yell, but God help you if you decide to move forward with taking those actions to go murder a police officer. Right. God help you if you're a police officer who says, I don't like protesters, so I'm just going to go gun them down indiscriminately. We don't want to be there.
So my question then, because we're all kind of agreeing it's bad, we're in this circumstance. I'm not telling people not to protest because I don't want to hear what you have to say. I'm saying, how can we jump over the protest, get the solution? How do we do that? Because we don't want to be standing in the streets yelling for 3 months.
We need to start holding police officers accountable. Are you aware that about 60 people gathered in California, some of them police officers, for a retired police officers kind of party that they were having.
No.
And they sang a racist, you should put this on, you guys should dig this tape
Not
up, it's
aware of this.
unbelievable.
Tell me about it.
They sang a racist song about Mike Brown being murdered in Ferguson and how he got what he deserved. And this is
Dead Leroy Brown was the singer
And
that they had at the party who
So
said it.
what I want to talk about really is the fact that the people who are doing this are not only not being held accountable, but they're using this as an opportunity to attack other people in society. And they're the police. They're the people who are supposed to be protecting people. So it's not acceptable for the guy who choked Eric Garner out to get off, and somebody has to do something about that. It's not acceptable for a witness, Sandra McElroy, in the Mike Brown case, to be a known racist who the prosecutor said, I knew she was lying, but I let her in front of the grand jury anyway. Somebody has to go back and fix these mistakes, and then we can talk about people's anger in the streets.
We've got people at the highest levels of government who I don't think are Pollyannas on this, regardless of what side of the aisle they sit on, and those are the people who are directly responsible for holding these lower tiers of government accountable. You know, we the people are on the Police Services Board, the higher levels of government set the state and provincial policies.
But
do you have faith in the political apparatus to deal with this? Because that is the only apparatus that I think is left, aside from the sergeants and so forth, but you're saying they're not
I
doing
don't
enough.
think that the police apparatuses have enough power, and I'll give you an example from Toronto.
The oversight have enough power.
I don't think that the oversight have enough power, okay? The police apparatus itself has a lot of power.
Sure, yeah.
The police were asked to stop what's known as carding in Toronto in April of this year. Carding is very similar to stop and frisk in that you stop people, it's not part of a police investigation, and you ask them for identification. The police were doing this in Toronto, they've been doing this for years. They were asked to stop. They haven't stopped till this day. To this day, they haven't even made a procedure to tell the police exactly how to change their behavior. This is 8 months after they were told by our civilian board, who's apparently in charge, has counselors on it, has a mayor on it. They were told to do it. They still haven't done it. Where is the accountability?
Is there any accountability for police right now left in North America, Ross? We got to go short.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult. It's very porous. The oversight hasn't been there. It's not strong enough. It's toothless.
Does it come from the streets? The response, does it come from the streets? Does it come from the politicians?
The response to fix this,
Yeah.
It has to come from the politicians to put the power in place for it. You know, Edmonton police just recently protested because they had a cop there promoted who had a very, very bad record, and they didn't like that he was promoted. Because let me tell you, as a good cop, you wear all this bad cop stuff all the time. You know, I just want to point out one other thing. This is really being made race. It's a part of it. But 2 cops murdered in LA by white people. Couple of cops murdered in New Brunswick, the RCMP, by a white guy. So there's, there's plenty of crime and bad guys to go around for this. And I think it has to do with police accountability, transparency, people being heard, and some response to it. I don't think we're seeing that.
When the police are held accountable for killing black people, I agree that lots of people die.
Anybody,
right?
killing
But
anybody.
what we're seeing is that when the police kill a black person, there's no accountability. That is across the board.
I will tell you that I've been contacted by victims of police shootings who are white, and they will say the same thing. So I think the issue is the accountability isn't on the race side, it's on the accountability side. White, black, or whatever.
We got to go in 1 second, 10 seconds, sir.
I just wanted to say, let's just remember that when somebody brings up race, it doesn't mean that nothing else is a factor. But when you deny race as a factor, you're going to run into a problem with people who know that it is.
Desmond Cole, Ross McLean, thank you for joining us.